Operation Meeting House. The night Tokyo burned the deadliest air raid in history, March 9th to 10th, 194,545-minute documentary script opening. The evening OF March 9th, 1945, midnight to 2:30. As the sun sets over the Mariana Islands on March 9th, 1945, something unprecedented is about to unfold. Across 3 airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, ground crews are making final preparations on 325 Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers. This isn't just another bombing mission. Tonight we'll witness the single most destructive air raid in human history. Major General Curtis LeMay, commanding the 21st Bomber Command, has ordered a complete tactical revolution. Everything the crews learned about high-altitude precision bombing is being thrown out. Tonight, they'll fly low, stripped of defensive guns, carrying nothing but incendiaries. The target, Tokyo's Shitamachi district, where 750,000 people live packed into just 12 square miles of wooden homes. By dawn, over 100,000 will be dead, more than either atomic bombing would kill. This is the story of Operation Meeting House. Chapter 1. The B-29 Superfortress, America's technological marvel, 2:30 to 8 o'clock, engineering achievement. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress represented the pinnacle of wartime aviation technology. Development required over 1.4 million engineering man-hours and cost approximately $3 billion, exceeding even the Manhattan Project's $1.9 billion budget. This wasn't just another bomber. The B-29 featured revolutionary innovations: pressurized crew compartments allowing high-altitude flight without oxygen masks, remote-controlled gun turrets operated by gunners using computerized fire control systems, and the most powerful piston engines ever mounted on an aircraft. Specifications and capabilities. Each Superfortress measured 99 feet in length with a wingspan of 141 feet. 4 Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, powered these massive aircraft. Maximum payload reached 20,000 pounds of bombs with a combat radius of 1,600 miles. The B-29 could fly at altitudes up to 31,850 feet with a maximum speed of 357 miles per hour. Mass production. By March 1945, American factories had delivered approximately 2,000 B-29s to combat units. Manufacturing was distributed nationwide. Boeing operated plants in Seattle, Renton, and Wichita. The Glenn L. Martin Company produced bombers in Omaha. Bell Aircraft Corporation manufactured them in Marietta, Georgia. Boeing's Wichita facility alone produced 4.2 Superfortresses per working day. This massive industrial effort would eventually deliver 3,970 aircraft before war's end, demonstrating American manufacturing capabilities that Japan simply could not match. Operational deployment. The 20th Air Force, personally commanded by General Henry Hap Arnold, deployed these strategic bombers initially from bases in China beginning June 1944. After American forces captured the Mariana Islands, operations shifted to these Pacific bases starting November 17, 1944. The 21st Bomber Command operated 3 bombardment wings from the Marianas, the 73rd and 313th Bombardment Wings based on Saipan, and the 314th Bombardment Wing on Guam. Together, these units could deploy over 300 B-29s for a single mission, a concentration of air power unprecedented in warfare. Chapter 2. Japan's Crumbling Defenses, 8 to 1330, Divided Command Structure. By early 1945, Japan's air defense system revealed fatal weaknesses. The Imperial Japanese Army and Navy operated completely separate command structures with minimal coordination. This institutional rivalry meant fighters and anti-aircraft guns operated under different authorities, preventing unified defensive strategies. Night Fighter Force. Japan's primary night fighter, the Nakajima J-1N1 Gecko, Moonlight, had been hastily converted from a reconnaissance aircraft. Armed with twin 20mm Type 99 cannons firing upward at 30-degree angles and another pair firing downward, the Gecko could theoretically attack bombers from unexpected directions. However, Japan had produced only 479 of these aircraft throughout the entire war, with many already lost in combat. The Kawasaki Ki-45 Toryu, Dragon Killer, served as another night fighter option, equipped with a 37mm cannon in the nose and oblique-firing 20mm cannons. But only 1,701 had been manufactured since 1941. The radar gap. Most critically, Japanese night fighters lacked airborne radar for interception. Pilots relied entirely on searchlights and visual identification, nearly impossible tasks against fast-moving bombers in darkness. Without radar guidance, even skilled pilots struggled to locate targets in the vast night sky. Ground-based defenses. Tokyo's ground defenses proved equally inadequate. The entire metropolitan area possessed fewer than 500 heavy anti-aircraft guns. The Type 88 88mm gun provided main high-altitude defense, while the Type 98 20mm cannon offered close-range protection with an effective ceiling of only 11,500 feet. Japan lacked fire control radar for anti-aircraft artillery, depending instead on optical rangefinders and sound locators that became useless in poor weather or darkness. Gunners essentially fired blind once night fell. The numbers tell the story. While America could deploy hundreds of B-29s from the Marianas alone, Japanese forces operated perhaps 200 operational night fighters throughout the home islands by March 1945. Fuel shortages severely restricted training flights, leaving new pilots with minimal night flying experience. Aviation gasoline had become so scarce that many aircraft remained grounded, preserving fuel for defensive operations against the expected American invasion. Japan was fighting a defensive war with inadequate resources and obsolete technology. Chapter 3. Curtis LeMay's Radical Gamble, 13:30 to 7 p.m. The problem with high-altitude bombing. Major General Curtis LeMay assumed command of the 21st Bomber Command in January 1945, inheriting a strategic bombing campaign that had failed to achieve decisive results. Previous high-altitude precision bombing raids from 30,000 feet proved ineffective for multiple reasons. The jet stream, winds exceeding 200 miles per hour at extreme altitudes, scattered bombs miles from intended targets. Engine strain from climbing to altitude with heavy bomb loads caused frequent mechanical failures, with magnesium alloy components overheating beyond safe operating temperatures. Cloud cover obscured targets 70% of the time, forcing bombardiers to rely on primitive radar that couldn't distinguish individual buildings. Revolutionary new tactics. After analyzing these operational challenges, LeMay made decisions that would transform the air war against Japan. His new tactics were radical yet logical. Strip the guns, remove all defensive armament except tail positions, allowing each B-29 to carry 7 tons of incendiaries instead of the usual 3.5 tons of high explosives. Fly low, operate at 5,000 to 9,000 feet to avoid the jet stream, reduce engine strain, and improve bombing accuracy. Attack at night, minimize exposure to Japanese fighters, which lacked radar and trained night fighter pilots. Individual navigation. Aircraft would navigate independently using LORAN radio signals, attacking in a continuous stream over several hours rather than concentrated formations. Weather as weapon. Weather forecasters predicted ideal conditions for March 9 to 10, clear skies with strong surface winds that would spread fires across the target area. LeMay understood that weather could be weaponized. The right wind conditions would transform individual fires into an unstoppable conflagration. Target selection. American planners selected Tokyo's northeastern districts with precision. Intelligence officers consulted maps produced by the Office of Strategic Services, ranking Tokyo's wards by infrastructure density using pre-war Japanese urban planning documents. The selected zone included Asakasa, Honjo, and Fukagawa wards, working-class neighborhoods with extremely high population density. Extended families lived in wooden structures separated by narrow alleys. Most critically, these areas contained thousands of small workshops producing aircraft parts, electrical equipment, and precision instruments. This represented cottage industry warfare, Japanese manufacturing distributed throughout residential zones, making it impossible to separate military from civilian targets. Chapter 4. The M69 Incendiary, Science of Destruction, 7 p.m. to 2400 hours, Weapon Design. The M69 incendiary bomblet represented advanced warfare technology specifically designed to defeat Japanese architecture. This hexagonal steel pipe measured 3 inches in diameter and 20 inches long, weighing 6 pounds. Unlike earlier thermite or magnesium designs that burned hotter but could be extinguished with water, the M69 used napalm, gelid gasoline developed through collaboration between Standard Oil and Harvard University scientists. Delivery system. Bomblets were dropped in E-46 aimable clusters containing 38 individual M69s that separated at 2,000 feet altitude. Each bomblet deployed a cotton streamer to orient its fuse downward. Upon impact, a time delay fuse burned for 3 to 5 seconds before a white phosphorus charge ignited, dispersing flaming napalm up to 100 feet in multiple directions. The delayed action ensured the weapon would be lying on its side when it detonated, maximizing the spread of incendiary material through buildings. Napalm adhered to surfaces and resisted water-based firefighting efforts. Testing and refinement. American engineers had tested M69 effectiveness at Dugway Proving Ground in Utah against replica Japanese residential structures built using pre-war architectural plans. The weapon created multiple ignition points across wide areas, with each bomblet capable of starting dozens of individual fires. The mathematics of destruction. Each B-29 carried 40 cluster bombs containing 1,520 individual bomblets. With 279 bombers ultimately reaching the target, Operation Meeting House would drop approximately 424,000 incendiary bomblets on Tokyo. American planners calculated this density would create a self-sustaining conflagration where separate fires would merge, generating powerful wind currents that would spread the inferno far beyond the initial impact zone. The science was precise, methodical, and devastatingly effective. Chapter 5. Takeoff. The mission begins. 2400 hours, 27:30, first launch. At 1735 hours on March 9th, the first silver B-29 lifted off from Guam's North Field. Through the gathering darkness came the distinctive roar of Wright R-3350 engines as bomber after bomber took to the skies. Mission Commander. Brigadier General Thomas Sarsfield Power of the 314th Bombardment Wing piloted the lead aircraft. Over the next hours, bombers departed at 50-second intervals from 3 island bases. The 14-hour round trip would test both men and machines to their operational limits. Crew preparations. Crews flew in lighter flight gear instead of heavy high-altitude suits, taking advantage of the lower altitudes and warmer temperatures. Without the weight of guns, gunners, and ammunition, the B-29s climbed efficiently, conserving fuel during the 1,500-mile journey to Japan. Navigation. As they approached the Japanese coast, Mount Fuji's snow-capped peak served as a prominent navigation checkpoint. Each crew navigated independently, using LORAN radio signals and visual landmarks. They would arrive over Tokyo in a continuous stream, not a concentrated formation. Chapter 6. Tokyo Unaware. The Calm Before Firestorm. 27:30, 31:00, Civil Defense Inadequacy. Air raid sirens sounded in Tokyo around 10:30 p.m., though most inhabitants initially remained in their homes. Previous high-altitude raids had caused limited damage, creating widespread complacency among the civilian population. Tokyo's civil defense preparations proved tragically inadequate for what was approaching. The city had only 18 concrete air raid shelters capable of protecting 90,000 people out of 4.3 million residents. Shelter systems. Most families relied on fugo, shallow trenches covered with boards or simple dugouts that offered minimal protection against incendiaries. These shelters might protect against blast and shrapnel but offered no defense against fire and intense heat. Fire department resources. The city's 8,000 firefighters possessed mainly hand pumps and bucket brigades designed for peacetime emergencies. Neighborhood associations had organized civilian firefighting groups consisting primarily of elderly residents, women, and teenagers equipped with sand buckets and water containers. Tokyo operated 286 fire engines, mostly manual pump units requiring multiple operators. Water pressure was insufficient for large-scale firefighting, while infrastructure would be compromised once the raid began. The target zone. The selected area in northeastern Tokyo housed 750,000 people in approximately 12 square miles. Wooden structures dominated the landscape, separated by narrow alleys barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Extended families lived in multi-generational homes built entirely of combustible materials. This was Shitamachi, the low city of working-class Tokyo, where traditional craftsmen, small manufacturers, and laborers had lived for generations. Tonight, their world would be consumed by fire. Chapter 7. The Pathfinders marked the target. 31:00, 34:30. First bombers arrive. The first Pathfinder B-29s arrived over Tokyo at 12:08 a.m. on March 10th, approaching from different directions to mark the target zone. Flying at just 5,000 feet, extraordinarily low for strategic bombers, they faced minimal opposition. Creating the Burning X. Pathfinders dropped M47 napalm bombs that immediately created visible fire markers, forming an enormous Burning X across the target district. The main force would use these blazing markers for aiming points. Weather conditions. Conditions proved ideal for the operation. Clear visibility with surface winds between 17 and 28 miles per hour, though gusts would reach up to 45 miles per hour in some areas. These winds would prove decisive in spreading the coming firestorm. The bombardiers' view. As the main force arrived minutes later, bombardiers aimed for the illuminated markers below. As M69 clusters separated and descended, observers described them as metallic objects glinting in the firelight, a sight that preceded unprecedented urban destruction. Chapter 8. The Firestorm Unleashed, 34:00, 40:00, Initial Ignition. Within minutes, thousands of individual fires erupted across the target zone. The strong winds quickly spread flames from building to building, merging separate blazes into a massive conflagration. The M69's delayed action fuses meant bomblets penetrated buildings before detonating, starting fires from within. Temperature and physics. Temperatures at ground level exceeded 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient to melt glass and metal infrastructure. The superheated air created powerful updrafts, generating intense wind vortices that lifted debris high into the air. Streets became impassable as asphalt ignited and wooden buildings collapsed from extreme heat. The sound of the inferno overwhelmed all other noise, while smoke and heat reduced visibility to mere feet. Yoshiko Hashimoto's story. 24-year-old Yoshiko Hashimoto was at home in Tokyo's Sumida district with her 13-month-old baby when the attack began. Her husband, an army officer, was on guard duty across the city. She would later provide testimony for historical records. The B-29s were dropping numerous firebombs, and it sounded like heavy rain. I was astounded to see the intensity of the air raid. I had never seen one before. As fires spread rapidly, Yoshiko fled with her parents, baby, and sisters through streets filled with evacuating residents. The narrow alleys of Shitamachi became death traps as thousands attempted to escape simultaneously. Desperate flight. Parents became separated from children in the confusion. Elderly residents who fell were unable to continue as crowds pushed forward. Firefighting brigades abandoned their equipment when temperatures made it impossible to approach the flames. At the Sumida River, Yoshiko witnessed scenes of chaos. Burning debris was falling around us and the wind was intensifying. Burning materials, signboards, wooden doors, and household items were airborne. Warehouses on both riverbanks were engulfed in flames. Her father pushed her and the baby into the water, an action that saved their lives. But her mother perished, along with Yoshiko's father and sister Etsuko. The rivers of death. Across the burning district, similar tragedies occurred repeatedly. Those who entered canals faced extreme water temperatures as the surrounding fires heated the water. Others were overwhelmed in the crush as thousands tried to reach water simultaneously. The conflagration's winds were powerful enough to lift people off the ground. Some victims were found far from their original locations, carried by the firestorm's incredible force. Shelter failures. Police stations, hospitals, and designated evacuation centers became surrounded by flames. At Kikukawa Elementary School, a designated shelter, investigators later found only metal objects and human remains among the ashes where hundreds had sought safety. Buddhist temples that had existed for centuries were destroyed along with those who had sought shelter there. The extreme conditions meant that even those in shelters faced lethal challenges from heat and smoke. The superheated air caused severe respiratory damage to those exposed even briefly. Chapter 9. The Scale of Destruction, 40:00, 46:00, Casualty Estimates. Following the raid, casualty estimates varied among different authorities. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey calculated 87,793 fatalities and 40,918 injuries. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department reported 83,793 deaths and 40,918 wounded. The Tokyo Fire Department estimated 97,000 killed and 125,000 wounded. Historical consensus indicates that over 100,000 people died that night, exceeding the immediate casualties from either atomic bombing. This single air raid represents the deadliest bombing attack in human history. Physical destruction. The attack destroyed 267,171 buildings across 15.8 square miles, eliminating 25% of Tokyo's structures. Over 1 million survivors lost their homes. Entire neighborhoods that had existed for generations were reduced to ash and rubble. Industrial impact. The industrial impact was severe and strategically significant. More than half of Tokyo's manufacturing occurred in small workshops within residential areas. Their destruction significantly impacted production of essential war materials. Thousands of skilled workers, machinists, craftsmen, and technical specialists who required years of training were lost or displaced from the city. American losses. American losses were comparatively minimal. 14 B-29s failed to return, with 96 airmen listed as killed or missing. Several bombers encountered severe turbulence from thermal updrafts created by the fires, causing loss of control. Others received anti-aircraft damage during their low-level runs. Aircrew members later reported detecting smoke even at their operational altitude. Crews who had initially questioned LeMay's tactics were sobered by witnessing the operation's scale and impact. Japanese defensive efforts. Japanese night fighter forces launched approximately 90 sorties but accomplished scattered interceptions. Without radar guidance, most pilots couldn't locate targets in the darkness and smoke. Anti-aircraft units engaged continuously but achieved limited success. Lieutenant Seichio Endo achieved individual success with 8 B-29 interceptions credited to him, but these were exceptional cases. Most defensive efforts proved futile against the overwhelming American force. Chapter 10, Aftermath and Expansion, 46:00, 52:00, the morning after. The morning of March 10th revealed a transformed landscape. Eastern Tokyo had effectively ceased to exist. Only concrete and brick structures remained standing across miles of ash-covered ground. Survivors searched through unrecognizable areas for landmarks that no longer existed. Recovery teams required heavy equipment to clear areas. Many victims could not be identified. Mass funeral services continued for weeks. Waterways remained blocked with debris for extended periods. Strategic implications. The operation's success immediately influenced American strategy. Within 10 days, similar raids struck Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, affecting Japan's four largest cities. The campaign then paused only because the 21st Bomber Command had exhausted its incendiary bomb supply. Production immediately increased, with American factories prioritizing M69 manufacturing. By mid-1945, America produced 50,000 tons of incendiary bombs monthly while Japan struggled to maintain basic ammunition supplies. LeMay's reflection. General LeMay later reflected on the moral implications. "I suppose if I had lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal." Yet General Arnold sent congratulations. "This shows your crews have the guts for anything." Campaign expansion. The methodical destruction continued. Operations resumed in May with refined techniques achieving even greater efficiency. By July, B-29s were distributing warning leaflets before raids, informing civilians which cities were targeted next, psychological operations demonstrating complete air superiority. By August 1945, 66 Japanese cities had experienced major incendiary attacks. Much of urban Japan was severely damaged before the atomic bombings occurred. Chapter 11, The Technological and Industrial Gap, 52:00, 56:30, American Advantages. The contrast between American and Japanese capabilities had reached its maximum disparity. While the United States could replace lost B-29s within weeks, Japan could not rebuild its destroyed urban areas or replace lost workers. American industrial production exceeded Japan's by a factor of 10. The B-29 program's $3 billion cost exceeded Japan's entire 1945 military budget. This wasn't just technological superiority, it was comprehensive industrial dominance. Scientific approach to warfare. The methodical nature of American operations reflected a scientific approach unprecedented in warfare. The Chemical Warfare Service had constructed detailed replicas of Japanese neighborhoods at Dugway Proving Ground using pre-war architectural plans. Standard Oil Development Company created napalm through extensive chemical research. Harvard and the University of Chicago contributed analytical studies on fire propagation patterns. This integration of scientific research with military operations contrasted sharply with Japanese military doctrine that emphasized traditional values over material considerations. Japan's strategic limitations. Japan's inability to develop effective countermeasures demonstrated strategic limitations. Despite the February 25 preliminary raid that destroyed 28,000 buildings, authorities made minimal improvements to fire defenses. Proposals to create fire breaks by demolishing buildings were not implemented. Evacuation plans remained largely theoretical. Military authorities insisted civilians maintain their positions even as intelligence indicated massive incendiary raids were planned. Chapter 12, Human cost and lasting impact, 56:30, 62:00, survivor trauma. The psychological impact on survivors was profound and lasting. Many described feeling that traditional protection systems had failed completely. Refugees departing Tokyo spread accounts throughout Japan, their experiences contradicting official information about the war situation. Yoshiko Hashimoto's testimony remains in historical archives. The memory of that night never leaves me. My mother, father, and sister died while my baby and I survived. I think about them every day. Children separated from families often never learned their relatives' fates. The social structure of working-class Tokyo was fundamentally altered, extended families dispersed, traditional businesses eliminated, neighborhood networks that had existed for generations disappeared overnight. Psychological warfare. Worker attendance at factories declined significantly as civilians lost confidence. The term routine air raid entered common usage as cities were systematically targeted. The psychological impact contributed to the collapse of Japanese civilian morale. Influence on surrender decision. The operation's impact influenced planning for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. Military planners calculated that continued incendiary raids would eliminate remaining industrial capacity by October. LeMay believed that strategic bombing alone might compel surrender without requiring invasion. Joint Chiefs of Staff estimates indicated that conventional bombing had already caused approximately 900,000 civilian casualties and would cause millions more if the conflict continued. These assessments influenced President Truman's decision regarding atomic weapons, viewing them not as alternatives to conventional bombing, but as potentially decisive psychological weapons that might shock Japan into immediate surrender. International legal considerations. The 1907 Hague Convention addressed bombardment of undefended cities, but interpretations of defended and military targets proved complex. Post-war tribunals prosecuted certain leaders for civilian targeting but did not address Allied bombing campaigns. The precedent established that military necessity could justify extensive civilian area impacts, influenced subsequent international humanitarian law development, despite later advances in precision weapons technology. Chapter 13. Commemoration and Historical Memory, 62:00, 66:00. Different paths of remembrance. Unlike Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which gained international recognition, Tokyo's firebombing remained less widely known outside Japan for decades. The atomic bomb's unique nature and political implications overshadowed conventional bombing's greater immediate casualties. Survivor advocacy. Survivors advocated for decades to have their experiences documented. Katsumoto Sorotome, himself a survivor, established the center of the Tokyo raids and war damage, preserving testimonies that might otherwise have been lost. The challenge of commemorating civilian losses while acknowledging historical context created complex memorial narratives. How should societies remember devastating military operations that contributed to ending a catastrophic war? Lessons for military strategy. Contemporary military strategists study Operation Meeting House for insights about air power capabilities and limitations. The raid demonstrated that urban destruction alone doesn't guarantee immediate surrender. Japan continued resistance for 5 more months. It proved that technical advantages can overcome geographic challenges, but showed that distinguishing between military and civilian targets becomes extremely difficult in modern warfare where industry is distributed throughout residential areas. Closing. The legacy, 66:00, 70:00, statistical summary. The numbers provide only partial understanding. 325 B-29s launched 279 reached target 1. 665 tons of incendiaries dropped 15.8 square miles affected 267. 171 buildings destroyed over 100,000 casualties 1 million displaced. Behind each number were individuals, American aircrew members executing military orders, Japanese families in residential areas, children separated from parents, survivors dealing with profound losses. Historical significance. Operation Meeting House remains history's most destructive air raid, serving not as a military achievement to celebrate, but as a sobering reminder about modern warfare's capacity for destruction. The raid illustrated how strategic objectives can justify extensive civilian impact, and how entire populations become affected by industrial-scale conflict. It demonstrated the convergence of scientific research, industrial production, and military planning in creating weapon systems of unprecedented destructive power. The question that remains. The operation succeeded in its immediate military objectives, destroying Tokyo's industrial capacity and contributing to Japan's eventual surrender. But it did so at a cost that continues to raise profound moral questions about the conduct of warfare. Were these attacks justified by military necessity and the goal of ending the war quickly? Or did they cross ethical boundaries that should govern warfare even in desperate circumstances? History provides no simple answers, only the sobering recognition of what modern weapons and total war can achieve. Final reflection. As we remember that night in March 1945 when Tokyo burned, we honor both the Americans who served their nation under extraordinarily difficult circumstances and the Japanese civilians who endured unimaginable horror. Their experiences remind us of war's true cost and the importance of seeking peaceful resolution to international conflicts. The firebombing of Tokyo stands as a testament to human capacity for both technological achievement and terrible destruction, a duality that continues to shape our world today.